Okay, on to our next section where we're going to dive into the core types of objects that you can configure in Visual KPI and specifically in the Visual KPI Designer. And you can see them plainly outlined here in the tabs: groups, KPIs, charts, and tables. Let's talk a little bit about what each type is, and then we will look into how to configure them or what might be different about them. So as I look over here in the end user experience, let's talk about groups. Groups is the hierarchy. This is just like folders on your PC, where you can have as many of them as you want, and they can have as many levels of them as you want. And they can contain other folders or they contain other things, and those things are the other tabs, meaning they can contain KPIs or charts or tables at any level of the hierarchy. Now, unlike the folders on your PC, there's automatic roll-ups of performance here. Objects can live in multiple groups at the same time. Groups can be dynamic and even moving based on their attributes, and their attributes can even come from other data sources. So there's lots of power in the hierarchy and in the groups. As you see, if I want to drill down through a set of groups here, I can see the performance at every level as I keep drilling down. And when I get down to a certain level, if I want to see just one of the types, like let's look at only the KPIs that exist in this level of the hierarchy, or only the charts that exist in this level of the hierarchy, I can do that. Okay, so this is where you're going to define that hierarchy. That is what groups are. And let's open some just to have a look at what that might look like. So I'll go through these core patterns of what they look like as we go through, but it's pretty obvious thing where every line is one of these objects. So every line is a group. Here's the home level group, the system group, and every column is an attribute of it. We'll go into a little more detail about that, and we'll talk about each one of these in just a bit more detail. Let's talk about the second object type, and that's KPIs. KPIs are each one of these individual metrics, like gross megawatts here, or pressure, or fuel cost. And it can contain a lot of things. It can include how the data is looking over time, what's the current status of it, lots of information, links to other things, calculations, many different ways to visualize it, detailed trend analysis, dynamic and moving targets and limits, such like that. So there's a lot of information about KPIs. We'll spend a lot of the training course on KPIs themselves because it's the most sophisticated one and the one that will show you the most about how the designer works in general. The third section here are the various additional chart types. So on KPIs or groups of KPIs, you already have multiple ways to look at them. There's visualizations already running. They're automatically generated just by having KPIs defined or groups defined. And then you have on top of that a whole bunch of other chart types. Let's look at some of them, like bar charts or embedded content or Gantt charts or Pareto charts or pie charts or managed trends with up to 20 manually entered pens or up to 100 automatically generated pens or query-based pens. And then X, Y, or scatter plots for all kinds of other analysis. So this is where you would define each one of those chart types. And again, the pattern is the same. Every line is one of those objects, and every column is just an attribute of it. Again, we'll look at those in a little more detail. And the last one is tables of information. If I scroll over here and go to tables, this is where you're going to be putting things like rectangular data. You know, here's a list, maybe a maintenance log or something that's happened or issues that have happened. It could be a maintenance log or shift report or a list of machines that are down or a list of failures or even a list of comments that have been made in the system. So anything that's rectangular in nature, that's where you would define the tables. Now, each one of these items has a different set of buttons down here, and when we get into the detail of each of these object types and how to configure it, then you'll see how those tools work. So that's a quick overview of the core objects. This is a short section on purpose just to give you that overview. And next we're going to go into how to open, how to save, how to work with those objects, and then move into a very detailed overview of what it looks like to create and edit some of these objects in Visual KPI. See you in the next section.